Hello and welcome to TelecomTV's Main Agenda panel discussion, SDN, NFV, Service Provider Impact, sponsored by HP and Intel. Now, the vendor community would have us believe that SDN, that's software-defined networks, and NFV, network functions virtualization, are a universal panacea for all the problems, both technological and commercial, that beset service providers in a tough new world. And maybe the vendors are right. An independent survey undertaken by TelecomTV itself and completed just last week got detailed responses from more than 150 industry movers and shakers, the great majority of whom say they believe SDN and NFV will help service providers take cost out of the network, take complexity out of the network, and make more money out of the network, all within the next 2 to 3 years. So, given the huge potential of SDN and NFV, and in light of our survey results, TelecomTV is presenting 2 panel discussions which we hope will help you, the viewer, the better to understand how SDN and NFV can be deployed by service providers to optimum effect. And so to our first panel. From HP we have Marie-Paule Odini and Colin I'Anson, together with Petar Torre from Intel, and also here to give us the all-important service provider perspective is Ed Candy of Hutchison 3. Welcome everyone. We know what we're going to talk about. Let's begin at the beginning, and let's begin with you, Marie-Paule. We're looking here at why SDN and why NFV. So the very first question I want to put to you is that our survey found that SDN and NFV is real, it's not a figment of anybody's imagination, it's not pie in the sky, it's taking place now. My question is, why now rather than at any other time?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. As you know, there's lots of things happening in the telco domain right now. So there are some constraints, challenges that the service provider are facing, like traffic increase over the top and so on, revenue drop, and they are looking for more flexibility, more agility to be able to cope, with all of that and also to generate some new revenues. At the same time, there's been, also technology changes, like IPs everywhere. There's some investment going on in the network on LTE. There are some also enhancements that have been provided on the IT side of the house with virtualization in the enterprise that they're looking into leveraging. And there are also huge enhancements that have been provided on the server side, on the hardware. And so all of that together, I think, has triggered, this initiative that has been launched in December, typically, by, some major operators to trigger a major action, with standardization, with ETSI, with collaboration, among industry players, and bringing this community all together to really, make this happen.
Okay, thank you. Peter, we've said that SDN and NFV is a reality now. People understand the nature of programmable networks. Do you think the technology is fully understood across the entirety of the vendor community, or do you think there are companies which are more specialist and better at it than others?
So the underlying fundamentals are well understood because they come from this enterprise cloud world. This is all very mature server virtualization type of things, orchestrating this type of loads. So everybody gets that one. The question is, what are you going to do with it in terms of how do you as a vendor or as a telecom adopt this type of technologies? And you can do it in many different ways depending on your legacy business models, your future business models. This is what differentiates all the different approaches. But the fundamentals, everybody is going to buy into server virtualization. It is simple.
Is it simple?
I think it's a technology that is well known. In enterprises, we've been virtualizing now for many, many years. It's a very mature technology. And when you come to a sector like telecom that is risk averse in the right way because you've got services you've got to keep and sustain every day, this is a technology that's reached the point that is safe enough to start thinking about. And yes, it's going to take us some time at the moment to go through some proof of concept work, some trials, getting used to a different type of world, but it's a change that has been proved in enterprise IT and one that can with confidence be looked at by the telecom operators. And of course, they themselves have started to act as quite a catalyst in this area with work that they did in publishing the NFV white paper last year that leads to all the work in ETSI. So, I mean, those set of operators have sort of opened it up. They opened the conversation from their end. It's not a push from the IT industry. So it's been a meeting of pieces.
Okay. Ed, Colin I'Anson says it's safe, is it?
I think anything that's brand new and experimental isn't safe. And from an operator perspective, what you would like to do is to pick those choices which are well proven, platforms which are understood and repeatable. Now, on the other side of it, we're in a very, very fast moving industry. Telco, I'd like to use the word, is not converging with the internet, it's actually migrating lock, stock and barrel. And that means that the challenges that an operator faces are varied and multiple and come at you really very fast. And the challenge is, how do you respond to all of these challenges? How do you change the tariffing, the services, the connection almost daily? And it's really only with these sorts of techniques that you can do that. And to a certain extent, we have done a lot of that. At launch, we set up a logical architecture, layered network, which was more like an enterprise system than a classic telco system. It was almost platform independent. We were running virtualization, multiple clusters. And that meant that as the change, which is really enormous change since 3G launched, to where we are now, we were able to digest that with a minimum amount of cost through managing change. And I think so that's where the savings come in networks, which can allow you to be extremely flexible. But on the other hand, there are lots of Heffalump traps in the midst of it, because you are connecting things together that you have never connected before. You are bringing up new services at very short time, all with the potential to disrupt. Now, we've been quite successful about that, but it is a lot of lessons learned. So it's not just, let's put it in, let's do it. It's quite tricky, and I should imagine it would be even more tricky for people who've got quite a large legacy system, because it only works if you put in a complete logical service architecture from day one and then build the functionality in onto that. To try and sort of shoehorn it into bits of legacy, I'm sure would be a disaster.
So, Peter, these Heffalump traps that Ed talks about,
Yeah.
are you aware of them, and do you tell your potential customers and clients about them?
Yes, we are very, very well aware of them. And this is when technology gets used for simple benefits, and they're like the first use cases of server running things that can be run in a software in a virtual machine. This is pretty well understood. But how this whole thing gets orchestrated, how does it get connected into other telco systems, and how to extract this type of flexibility that could be achieved coming from a cloudy world, this requires taking not just the virtualization piece of it, but transforming a number of other higher level elements, like how this vendor ecosystem is operating, how the telco is internally structured to take advantage of these type of things.
Why SDN and why NFV now? Is it because, Colin, perhaps you can take this to start with, is it because it's being presented to an audience, to a potential customer base as being, this is the best thing since sliced bread again, this is the latest version of it, it's great, you've got to have it, or is there an underlying basic need for it? And if so, what is that need?
I think we're at a point now where the technologies have come together in a way that can address the set of needs that are out there. Operators have experienced over the last few years revenue simply not growing, but the amount of bandwidth required going up at a massive rate over the top surfaces, and there is a very simple example of that. So the need and the pressure is there. The world downturn financially has not been good or not been healthy for anything, and in particular with SDN and NFV have been two technologies that have appeared hand in hand, from their different sources, and now they've actually learned how to hold hands together as well. But when you look at them, you say, well, neither of them are particularly radical new ideas, because the whole idea of separating the data plane and control plane in SDN, well, we've done that in telecom signaling for years, so that's pretty well seen that one, know that trick very well, and the whole idea of virtualization is understood. But now you can see the bringing together and saying, can it be done? And I think it comes back to that group of operators who published that first white paper, who literally knocked the dam down, and the rest of the industry went, yeah, this is all doable, and the customer base is saying to us, the supply side, we're suddenly keen to go and investigate this area. And I think it's been a sort of a two-way thing. As the operators themselves pushed into it, folks from the IT industry, and in particular, our friends in Intel and ourselves, have been able to take a real strong role now in developing how it's going to happen.
Okay.
Maybe,
Ed, sorry, Peter, go on.
maybe a little bit on these type of things that we were doing. So this was based on take the proven technologies and proven stacks, find early problems to solve in terms of workloads to virtualize, and just invest in that 2 years ago, last year. Today we are at the stage where some of these things are going into pilot, and some of these things are going into production. Depends per what is the comm service provider or what's the telco equipment manufacturer. I mean, their product lines are pretty clear. This is just simply vote into.
Ed, do you buy that argument that it's a two-way street? You're not being sold to. You think you've been out looking for something yourself?
I think, as I said earlier, the challenge is how do you manage the rapid change within the internet. And what you don't want to be faced with is constantly having to reinvent platforms, reissues of software, do the job again and again and again, because that's very expensive. And every time you change a release, you've got a potential for a fault or having to roll back some services.
Sure.
So I think the advantage of a flexible network, as we've shown, is that you can accommodate the changes and the flexibility without a massive disruption to the normal running of the system. So I think it is probably the only answer in many respects. I guess that you have to move a little bit away from the idea that the software will actually set your dimensions of the network for you. I think that's perhaps a step that's getting a little bit too far in some areas, where the decisions are being made for you, because the end result is if the incorrect decisions are made for you, then actually reverting and removing those decisions can require a lot of people and a lot of effort. So you have to keep a little bit clear of that part. But where there are obvious dimensioning issues with the network, we constantly alter backhaul densities, capacities, and reconfigure the network to respond to capacity. That works extremely well, and that's part of the flexibility, because when you have very, very large requirements for data over the network which change from time to time, you have to manage that flow. You have to keep the network really delivering and providing. So, the flexibility, much flexibility you can build into the network, the better. So now, how do you implement it? How do you go forward?
Well, before we move on to that, which we're doing on the second panel, one of the major findings of our survey is that cloud will benefit mightily from this. Would SDN and would NFV in particular be possible, do you think, Marie-Paule, without the cloud in the first place? And how is the cloud going to benefit from what's happening to the networks?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, to me, there are, two things. One is the cloud is an enabler. So you have, as we said, we decouple, your resources, what we call NFV infrastructure, compute storage, networking, and this is like a pool of resources. This is your cloud. And of course, it needs to be tuned a bit because it is a telco cloud and there are some, requirements. But basically, this is a cloud, you have a cloud management system and so on. This is your baseline. And then you move telco applications to that. So of course the cloud is going to benefit from that. There's going to be more and more applications running in the cloud, and people managing the cloud will get more and more things to do and to take care of. At the same time, you have also this SDN technology, which is also improving the cloud quite significantly. You bring in this new set of capabilities like flexibility on the cloud bursting and so on, being able to programmatically reroute, the flows and reprogram the networking traffic. So that really, is a big benefit to the cloud. So you'll see, very short term, we already see applications like Cloud RAN, like virtual CPU with some intelligence moving in the cloud. We see virtual IMS with some of the functions, being managed in the cloud and so on. So yeah, definitely. I mean, cloud is becoming a big part of telco network now.
Thank you. We're running short on time, so I'm going to do a sort of round-robin question moderately quickly over the next 4 or 5 minutes or so, and we'll be finishing. But I'd like to end by asking you in turn. I'm going to start with you, Peter, if I might. The technologies that we've been talking about are moderately mature. You can use them now, people understand them. What's going to happen going forward?
So going forward, the idea is obviously to expand into areas that cannot be tackled today, first because of technical reasons. One of those is that not all workloads are going to run in software today. So some of these require some special accelerators coming in forms of software and hardware. So all these type of things are being tested now, being ready for future deployments. Other things, I mean, so then it goes in direction away from just the software appliance, more into the radio access pieces, because for obvious laws of physics, this cannot be software only. And in future, we need to see how far this goes and how fast it goes into anything with optics. The other pieces that are happening now, and this comes also back to this cloud comments. So cloud as a concept is very good to look at because it goes tops down, from services down to the last storage element somewhere there. So as we try to apply cloud concepts into the telco world, we should also look at this type of tops down view. So services orchestration to the last element down there. And this is something that in my view requires a little bit more understanding and looking after, and a little bit more investment to get there. So then special telco use cases will benefit not just by having virtualized last element down there, but likely also virtualized, like software defined, programmable, but tops down use on that.
Okay, thank you. Colin, we've talked about the future. Let's talk about the present. Let's not leap too far ahead, and run before we can walk, as it were. Obviously, we can do things today, but what is possible? What's possible now? Take the hype out of it.
I think it's very important to know what out of the existing portfolios of technologies, those of us in IT, actually works, functions today, at this moment in time, and what even with just small modifications will improve. So as we've been working on our program to develop NFV for HP, I've been leading the design process. We've made a number of interesting discoveries about it. In terms of the raw server capability, the raw compute, including the enhancements that Intel can bring through accelerators, etc., we can keep up with the loads that we found and been presented to us to look at and work with, and we see clients moving. So the server estate, feel very solid about that. Storage, we understand the requirements on there, we understand the particular peaks of it. That works out of today's portfolio as well. The real surprise was the network, because you'd always have thought just some IP pipes would be really easy. But the rules of cloud, the rules of traditional data centers, is to oversubscribe the environment. But when you come to NFV, you've got line rate traffic. Line rate traffic running through an oversubscribed data center don't work. And so you've got to think about how you design and what components you have. We're very fortunate as HP with a modern portfolio of switches and capabilities for the networking, and we can do it without blocking, without oversubscription. So we can do the basic infrastructure and bring those pieces together, and then when you come up to the next level, the orchestration is the next challenge, and we've been very open-minded in doing that. We're developing towards what ETSI is going to require as a complete solution, but at the same time we're not stupid, because we know that some people will turn around and say, just give me the infrastructure, I'll do it myself. Let's let them do it, because they can start today, they can control everything. Other people will say, hey, I'd like to use my proprietary hypervisor environment, I love VMware, so we'll support them and do that and help them work through that route. Or they'll come along, and perhaps most important of all is the network equipment provider will turn around and say, hey, I've got an orchestration environment that's linked well to my applications. Our goal is to be supportive of that as well, to make sure that all of those work, so that as the carrier starts to look at the service provider looks at the different opportunities that they want to as applications, the full spectrum is completely open to them, and they can move ahead. Now, of course, there are some apps that are going to be difficult, and in particular, to Ed's point earlier, combining together some of these apps as a big system has got some real dangers. So today is about picking the ones and the twos and the threes that work and come together, that we have in controlled pieces. Let's start and make the learning there, and then grow from that point over the next few years. But to do it today, very possible.
Thank you. Marie-Paule, I'm going to come to you now, because let Ed have the last word, as he's the service provider representative here. What about a company like HP then? There are several major global vendors out there. All would say, or wouldn't they, we can do it, we can do everything, you know, buy our kit, etc., etc. HP's been there for a long time. What does HP bring to the party that you think others don't?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I mean, it's true that lots of people say, you know, they do lots of things and so on. As HP, I think, you know, as Colin said, you know, we work with everybody, and we can be, you know, your integrator and so on. We understand IT, we understand telecom, and in our portfolio itself, you know, we bring, you know, lots of the components of the NFV infrastructure. We are bringing to the market an NFV orchestrator. I mean, it's already, you know, going through POC with a large European operator and so on. So it's already quite advanced. We have a number of telco applications, virtual IMS, virtual CDN, and so on. So we understand that space, and we can help you with some components. And more importantly, you know, we have all this ecosystem of partners. We have solution centers where they can come, experiment, and so on. We're working very closely with Intel to help them, you know, to migrate to this NFV environment, and we can be, you know, a nice, you know, consulting integrator partner for you. So I think we bring a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, Ed.
Well, just taking on the point of Colin, there's a fundamental change in the way many of the operators are going about their business, because once upon a time you used to design and build and then buy the parts, and you took total control of the network. At Hutchinson in recent years we've gone to network sharing, we've outsourced the major IT design and development, and we run quite skinny technical centres. And the reason we do that is that we give to Caesar that which is Caesar. So rather than do the design and then hand it over to a supplier who also repeats the design, and then we commission and the supplier commissions, and then we maintain and they maintain, it's a duplicate cost. And the best way is to define the requirements in terms of a service level provision or a job description or a component description. Define what you want to achieve out of the network, and then say to your suppliers, over to you. You know, you supply, you maintain, you operate. And so in some of this discussion, you know, should we put it in the cloud, or should we build it, or should we use this virtualization technique? Actually, we should step back from that as an operator and measure the end result and find ways of actually determining if that performance is correct. So then that actually leaves the vendors the opportunity to do the job the best, and the best vendor who achieves it, those with the greatest flexibility, of course, is the one who becomes the dominant supplier. Well, so it's a big change. Yeah.
Thank you. We're out of time, folks. Thanks very much, David. London Eye has completed a revolution. That means we must be. So time's up for this programme, but there's a second on the way very soon in which we will examine in more detail why service providers need to implement SDN and NFV, and what the benefits of that implementation will be to their business models going forward. But for now, all it remains for me to do is to thank the panel once again for their input and for their insight. Thank you all. And thank you for watching. Goodbye for now. If you want to download the full findings of our survey, you can via a hyperlink not far from this player window. And don't miss our second panel discussion on TelecomTV now.